Welcome to another episode of HSF Conversations, where we discuss theology, spirituality, ministry, and culture from a more informal perspective than we normally do through our usual essays. We're excited today to have Reverend Ken Simpson with us to talk about some aspects related to ministry and his experience in ministry. He serves as the pastor of Calvary Fellowship in Fenton, Missouri. He's been there since 2009. He's married to his wife, Jody, and he has two children, Ellie and Cole. Ellie is a student at Welch College, where I teach, and we've been delighted to have her here. I wanted to say that my earliest memories of you, Ken, are from probably 1993, 1994. So I would have been 5 or 6 years old. And I think you worked with enrollment or something at Welch College. You had recently graduated probably in 1991. And I remember even then really looking up to you and thinking that you were awesome. And my opinion of you has not changed. And so I'm excited to have you here with us today.
It's good to be with you, Jesse. Remember, you were only 6 years old. So
I'd like to think I've grown a little bit wiser since then, but that's what I'm saying. My feeling about you hasn't changed. So that's good.
Oh, goodness. It's been a joy and a blessing to watch the Lord work in your life. And I'm so thankful for your contribution to the Hellas Society Forum and Welch College. And so it's a joy to be with you today.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so tell us a little bit about the church you currently pastor, maybe a little bit about the history of the church. How long had the previous pastor been there? What was the makeup of the church when you arrived? What is the makeup of the church now?
So the church started in 1955, and from 1955 to 1978, there were 8 different pastors. The average tenure of each of those pastors was only about 3 or 4 years. And it would be interesting. I suspect that would probably be pretty close to a national average back then. So 10 pastors since 1955. And I followed Brother Jerry Norris, who served 31 years here at Calvary Fellowship Church. And he began, actually what happened in 1978, Calvary Fellowship Church had a building and about 25 people, but no pastor. And Brother Norris began a mission work here in Fenton, and they had about 25 people, a pastor, but no building. And so there was a merger took place in 1978. Brother Jerry led the congregation at the Liberty Mission over to Calvary Fellowship Church. So that was a crucial point in our church's history. And since 1978, we've been at this location here in Fenton, which is about 14 miles from the Arch. So we're in a suburban area. But God really blessed that the merger that happened. And we're thankful for his blessings during those years.
Yeah. So when you went there, okay, so you said the previous history of the church, there had been a lot of pastors with short tenures. And then you had a guy just before you came that had been there 31 years. And so I'm assuming within sort of the consciousness of the church, the mind of the church, everyone knows this guy. And then you step in and then you're the pastor. You've been there 10 years. So still being somewhat younger, I mean, what was that like? What's it like to transition from someone who's been there 31 years into being the new pastor?
Yeah, it was, there was a unique situation in that Jody and I actually served Calvary Fellowship Church in the late 90s. When we left Nashville, Tennessee, I enrolled at Covenant Theological Seminary and worked part-time at Calvary Fellowship Church under Brother Jerry. I did outreach ministry, did some teaching, etc. And during those 2 years, our hearts just meshed with the congregation here. And it was a wonderful time. They had talked to us about remaining on staff and at some point transitioning into a senior pastoral role. Brother Jerry at that time did not know just how many more years he would have. Again, this was in the year 2000. I guess that's when I graduated from Covenant. But the Lord just really did not give us the freedom to remain. He had put in my heart the burden to go pastor a church. And so we left St. Louis and went across the state to Kansas City and served 9 years at the Beacon Free Will Baptist Church just outside of Kansas City. And then Brother Norris continued and for another really 8 years. And then when he was approaching retirement, he reached out and asked if I would pray about this ministry. And I told him I would. He actually invited me to come and preach a revival. And I didn't know until I got here that he would have liked for me to have met with the board and kind of discussed and kind of interviewed. And I just felt like right now I need to just preach this revival. But that was kind of the beginning of God working in my heart about this ministry. And so one thing that I really appreciate, Brother Jerry, he could have stayed longer. He was 65 when he retired from Calvary Fellowship Church. He continued to be engaged in ministries, and he would later pastor a General Baptist church in the area. And he continued until the Lord took him home. He could have stayed perhaps longer at Calvary Fellowship, but he didn't want to stay too long. And I appreciated him moving on into his retirement from Calvary Fellowship with that kind of philosophy and mindset. And so the unique thing about us being here is that I had relational rent. I had some relational capital when we came back. So, that helped. There were a lot of people in the church at that time who knew us when we were here previously. And so that helped a lot. Some guys following a long tenured pastor don't have that opportunity. And I'm thankful that we were able to serve the church a few years before, we would come as senior pastor.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find it difficult to kind of step into that role? And obviously, whenever you go into a pastorate, there are things you keep the same, there are things you maybe change. Did you find that to be difficult? I mean, someone's been there 31 years.
Yeah. Yes. I did a lot of listening. I did a lot of interviewing. I did a lot of loving. I wanted to make sure that the people who didn't know us, excuse me, the people who didn't know us before got to know us. We wanted to spend time with them, building that relational capital. One thing that I have learned that I am highly relational, high touch, and that shepherd mentality is really important and to me and the way the Lord has wired me. And so I didn't just come in and make a whole bunch of changes. Sometimes that's necessary. But in this context, I entered a time where there were some challenges in the church. There were some sin issues that happened just before the transition happened. There was a situation where there had to be some staff that had to be hired. And so I just worked slowly, methodically with the leadership team. And God used that first year especially to just learn the congregation. And it was fairly healthy. Wasn't always easy. There was a lot of stress, but it was a fairly healthy transition. And if I could say another word about that transition, one of the reasons why it was healthy is the way Brother Jerry handled it. He did a 10-week countdown, and he made a big deal for 10 weeks before we actually came. And whenever the first Sunday in June was our first Sunday, and then he and his wife Brenda left, and they were gone for about 3 months. And I told him, I said, look, if this is your home church, they raised their children here. And I wanted them to know I was okay with them remaining in the church if that's what they felt the Lord would have them to do. And I wanted to cultivate that relationship in a way that we could trust one another. And so they did for a while, and then the Lord moved them to pastor a General Baptist church in the area. And he had other ministries that he was involved in as well. So, he never retired. He never retired from ministry, though he retired from Calvary Fellowship Church. So
that's really helpful, because I think on your side of things, that emphasis that you've given us on kind of being patient and loving people and building relationships, and not just kind of coming in and trying to change everything and blow everything up. So much of ministry is relational, and so that's really helpful. And then, like you said, that he kind of set you up for a smooth transition with setting up those 10 weeks. That seems really wise.
He did. He said a lot from the pulpit. He said, I will not be your pastor. And if you come to me and ask me a question about the church, I'm not going to answer. I'm going to say, there's your pastor over there. Go talk to him. And he did. Those weren't just words. He meant that. And that's the way that's the way he was after the transition. And I tried many times. I publicly affirmed my appreciation to him and how the Lord used him in this ministry. And so it went over well. It really did.
Yeah, that seems really helpful, though, for churches in general, to, especially when you have a minister retiring, to set something up like that, so that he's not just stepping away and kind of letting things go, and he's not overstaying and kind of complicating the transition. But that seems like a really good scenario. That's good. That's good. So you mentioned that your church was in a suburban setting. So did you say 14 miles from the Arch?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of Free Will Baptist churches, a lot of our viewers are Free Will Baptists. I would say probably the majority of our Free Will Baptist churches are maybe in something more like a rural setting. So maybe we're more familiar with that. What do you think some challenges are, or some unique things are, about ministering in a suburban setting as opposed to maybe another context?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jesse. When I think about those who are attending our church and who are members of our church, we are located on the southwest corner of the metropolitan area of St. Louis. We're in St. Louis County, but there are 4 different counties from which our folks come. And we are spread out. One of the biggest challenge is just that, it's the geography of where our people are located. And some people drive 20 minutes. One family that I am taking through membership now, they're driving 50 minutes. And I would say that's, I've always felt like it's really important for you to attend a church in your community so you can serve the community. So, we don't want to just draw from people from all over these counties, and yet being a metropolitan church, it's nothing to drive 25 minutes to work. They're kind of used to it, but it's challenging because if you're doing some evangelism and inviting people, come and go with me to my church, it's 25 miles that way. That can be a real challenge. And traffic, and that means time. And so getting off work, coming to a small group meeting or a service opportunity, you have to plan and be intentional about the scheduling and times, and patient with folks who work, and it takes time, to come to the church. One of the things that COVID has helped us with is rethinking how we do our service projects, and serving the Lord doesn't have to happen just here at this location. And so we're seeing some people meet in their subdivisions and do their Bible studies together and in a geographically, close proximity, to one another where they can do their Bible studies during the week. So that's been a good thing.
Yeah. Would you say that distance and driving and travel and all of that, is that the most difficult thing or the most unique thing you think about a suburban church? Because I agree with you that
Well,
you really want people to be right there within the community if possible. It's helpful for meeting one another's needs as well. Someone has a need and then they're 30 or 50 minutes away. That makes it hard. It's really hard for the pastor. It's hard for minister. I mean, for congregants to minister to the needs of one another. So are there other challenges, or would you say that's maybe the biggest one?
well, yeah, no, I don't know that that's the biggest one, but that's a challenge for sure. Thinking about our youth, we have around 20 teenagers right now. 12 different school districts are represented by that. And, there are 3 in homeschool. And so that's a challenge for Ryan Akers, our student pastor. There are a lot of different religious beliefs and faith communities in St. Louis, predominantly is Catholic. And, but there are different religious, groups here in St. Louis as well too. So it is challenging. It's a challenging area.
Yeah, you get a little bit of the diversity maybe we often think of in an urban setting, kind of coming out to a suburban setting. And I would think increasingly so. It seems like in some places, people are, especially with COVID, maybe moving out of cities. So suburbs seem to be growing again or growing even more. So have you experienced that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The ethnic diversity is here. Religious diversity. Fenton, our community where we live, we're seeing that, especially in the ethnic diversity. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is partner with some parachurch organizations like Oasis International. And they are really doing a good job in meeting the needs of people who are migrating here to St. Louis from war-torn countries. And so we just had a meeting today about serving with them in an effort to feed several families. I think they've set a goal to feed 1,000 different families in South St. Louis. And so that's been good for our church to be a part of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, very good. So you pastor a church that has a couple of staff members, is that right? A couple of staff members or several? So I wanted to ask you some questions about that. So you serve alongside some other guys. I think you mentioned Ryan a minute ago. He's your student pastor. But what is it like to serve alongside other ministers on a day-to-day basis? What are some things that are unique to that? But then also being kind of the lead pastor, the senior pastor, what are some things you try to do to mentor, to pour into your staff, to help them grow spiritually, to grow in their understanding of ministry? Because the guys that are serving alongside you are younger than you as well. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I've got 2 great guys who serve on staff along with my wife. She is the administrative assistant. She works part-time, and Jody does a great job managing the office, and I'm thankful for her and her service. When Ryan came to Calvary Fellowship on our 1-year anniversary, and so up until that, at that point, there was several different staff members who had served on staff, but no one served longer than 5 years. And it was important to me to have some tenure with our staff. And so I am thankful that Ryan has been here on staff for 11 years. Jody and I have been here about 11 and a half years, because Jody and I have been here for 12 and a half years. And so he is serving in the student ministries and focusing on some family ministry. And then Micah Turnbow joined the staff in 2015. 13 part-time doing some outreach. He's also gifted with music ministry. And so he leads our music ministry, and he's been leading that full-time since 2014. And so I appreciate these guys and the way that we're able to work together. We complement each other. And I think some of that success that we've had with some tenure with both of them is the collaborative effort in doing our ministries. It's important for us to meet each Monday, and we will meet for at least an hour. Sometimes it goes 3 or 4 hours, depending on what all is going on. But there's a lot of communication among my staff, and I appreciate that. Again, I'm highly relational, and we're learning how to just work together through our challenges, through the opportunities that we have. So they do a great job and bring some creativity to the ministry, and I'm thankful for that. They bring some youth to the ministry. Ryan's 36, and Micah is, he just turned 30, and I just turned 52. So, that's helpful. That's helpful, Jesse.
Yeah. How do you foster, thinking about collaboration? I hadn't intended to ask you this, but thinking about collaboration, how do you foster an environment that is kind of collaborative? So obviously you're leading the church, being the senior pastor, but you're saying we're working together on these things. How do you create that sort of environment?
Yeah, a lot of freedom to express ideas and thoughts. At the end of the day, there will be some decisions that I'm going to have to make, but I want them to be able to come to the table and share their ideas, not just in our staff meetings, but we also have a leadership team meeting that meets every other week, and that's with our deacons. And sometimes that's just a 30-minute touch and base, but we're a part of that team. And so it's important that they are able to enter into those meetings with creative ideas, something new, something fresh, as well as some of their frustrations. I want to hear their frustrations. It's not so that they won't share those frustrations with other people in the church, but it would be so that we could understand the elements that they're wrestling with and help guide and pray for them. I can't tell you the number of times we just had meetings of just weeping and prayer time, and God has used those times to just mesh our hearts together. There have been times where we've sparred and it's been frustrating. And I mean, there's a little bit of vulnerability with that. And yet at the end of the day, we're on the same team. And I think that has created somewhat of a healthy relationship where they feel like they can share honestly their frustrations, their joys, their struggles. And it's very open, transparent, and very trusting, very trusting.
So thinking about that relational aspect, then are there some things you do or that you've done in the past to help mentor? Do you all read through books, or are there some other things you've done?
Yeah, we've done that. We've read books together, discussed it, portions of books. We've gone off site, not as much as probably we need to, but go off site for prayer and reflection and thinking about the ministry and some goals and stuff for the next year. Again, that's probably, honestly, that's an area that I need to probably grow in that would probably help them. And so, that is important. We have done that in the past. We probably need to incorporate a little bit more of that moving forward.
Sounds like a lot of that though is happening. So maybe some of the things I mentioned were more formal, kind of, hey, let's go through this book. But it sounds like relationally in those meetings, a lot is happening, like parenting, just kind of in the day-to-day thing where you're having conversations, you're interacting, sharing needs and hurts and all sorts of things. So maybe it's happening in a more informal way, but on a regular basis.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So there are times our meetings are on Monday mornings. but I can't tell you the number of times we would take 2 hours on a Tuesday or a Thursday and come together and brainstorm a certain issue that we are thinking about and praying about in terms of ministry or maybe a frustration. And so there are those informal times that I think is important. I think it's really important. My door is open more than it is shut. And sometimes that has come around to hurt me in the sense of time management, because that means that I may have to work a little bit longer hours or make up that time in my study or preparation or whatever I'm doing at home or in the evening. But it's important to me that the staff has the freedom and the opportunity to discuss what's important to them and their ministry. And so we take that time whenever we need to.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something here, kind of as we close, thinking about our listeners. So you've been at Calvary for, you said, 12 and a half years now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's a good amount of time. And I assume you hope to be there, many more years. But that's not common. I mean, there are a lot of churches, I think, like you mentioned earlier, that have pastors and pastoral turnover. And sometimes those things are issues within a church where churches kind of sort of burn through pastors. And then sometimes, though, it's pastors who just move from one place to the next. Is there something you would say to help maybe our listeners think about faithfully pastoring a congregation, maybe even longevity in the ministry, and maybe even in a single pastorate?
Yeah. I knew that since Brother Jerry stayed here for 31 years, that I have at least the possibility to also be a long tenured pastor. And that's a desire in my heart. Staying fresh is important. Being open to new ideas and adjusting in the ministry, that's important. I think leading at a pace that keeps one spiritually healthy is important. And Jesse, I don't know that I've always been faithful with that, just quite honest. And I'm just being really transparent and honest here. And a few years ago, I was really nearing burnout. Maybe I was burnout. And so I took some steps to help with that. Talking to other colleagues and pastors, and spoke into my heart, and that was so good. And I needed that. I hired a ministry coach for 6 to 8 years, and that coach just poured into my heart and my mind, and I was able to share some of my struggles and my frustrations in ministry. So just being in tune with where you are in your own soul care. Resilient Ministry is a book that I'm reading right now. It's an excellent book. And we pastors, and especially those who really want to model that shepherding type of pastor, high touch, sometimes our greatest strength in that we care can also be our greatest weakness. We can care too much and we don't take care of our own soul. And I know that that's been a challenge for me, just to speak frank with you and our listeners. And yet I think it's important. And there are people in my life who have helped me to be honest about where I am. And that has helped me remain in this ministry and continue to love the people. And boy, they love us and they express that. And that's so meaningful. So, yeah.
What
I feel like I'm kind of rambling there. But,
no, that's great. What would you say to someone that, so you emphasized earlier the relationship you have with the guys that you're serving with at the church, but just now you've said something about friends and mentors outside of the church as well.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone that that maybe doesn't have that? I mean, it sounds like that's a pretty important part there.
It is. Everyone needs someone to help them through the ministry challenges, the good times and the difficult times. I have spent this week already 2 or 3 hours talking to some other guys in Missouri who are struggling. And there are a lot of pastors out there who are hurting. And sometimes they just need a listening ear. Sometimes they just need a friend that will just hear them out and speak some wisdom back to them. And I think that's really crucial. You know, we talk about accountability partners. I've got some guys in my life that ask me the tough questions, the serious questions. And I need to hear those questions and I need to answer those questions. And so iron sharpens iron, and we need one another in our lives. And so I would encourage anyone, you've got to have someone that you can trust, and you can share your ministry experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly with them, and help process what you're going through with someone else.
Yeah, some of those relationships form certainly later in life, guys you meet in your association or in your state or in other ways. For me, so many of those relationships were formed in college, guys that that I built friendships with then that were in the ministry. Unfortunately, some of those guys aren't in ministry today, which is disheartening to think about. But some of those other guys I speak to on a regular basis, and they're such an encouragement to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you, and we thank you for all of the insight that you've given us. And we certainly hope the Lord continues to bless you there at Calvary Fellowship and the church.
Thank you, Jesse. Calvary Fellowship is a wonderful group of people. I am privileged to pastor them, and I am thankful for everyone who just unites together to honor the Lord in following Jesus Christ. And so thank you for this time.
Yeah. God bless you,
Appreciate
brother.
what you're doing. Okay. Bye-bye.